Alright, so to begin texturing, let me get out of the sculpt geometry tool, we first have to apply a material. And a material will tell Maya how light will enter or affect a surface. So I'm going to select this material and I'm going to right click and I can go, let me right click a little higher. Right click and I can say material attributes, assign new material. We want to create a new material for this object. And there's a lot here. I would recommend at this point not to experiment too much with all this stuff. I mean, and as soon as I tell you that, you're going to want to do that. But in the beginning, the main two we're going to deal with will be the Lambert and the blend. And we may get into some of these others later. They can get kind of complicated, and but let's start off with go into our Maya surfaces and let's just look at a Lambert. A Lambert material, if you notice, is matte, meaning it's not shiny. It diffuses the light. You won't have reflections or specular highlights, as opposed to if you change it from a Lambert to a blend. Blend, you notice, begins to have a specular highlight. It looks glossy, like it would be plastic or glass. And that highlight can be changed. It can, depending on the material, something that diffuses that light might be something like a rough metal versus something that has a very tight specular highlight with an accurate reflection might be something like a glass. And you open up, this window is your attribute editor, and it selects, you select your object. In this case we have a material selected, and we have tons of attributes. Attributes are things that describe the material, such as the color, transparency, the list goes on. And what we want to do is we want to start manipulating the color of this snow. So we've created it and it's already applied it. When we right clicked, it says assign new material, so it goes ahead and assigns the material, and then we can begin toying with it. So let's so if we take the color up or down, you see what happens. You can click the color and you can actually select a color. I think a light, really light blue might look kind of snowy. Transparency, it does what you think it would do. Makes the material transparent. Ambient color, oh wow, how do you describe ambient color? Maybe I'll come back to that. I don't use it a lot. Ambient color can actually make the source, the material, become a light source in certain situations. It increases it goes beyond the influence that the lights in the scene have, and it begins to take on its own luminance. These are related. The ambient color and the incandescence, they're slightly different. To me, the incandescent makes it a little more washed out, but these are used, but we're going to ignore those for now. Bump mapping is very interesting. We're going to get into that in this tutorial actually. So we can see a limited degree of effect that it has on our material as we manipulate the color. But once we get into light, we don't know if I were to change things such as the bump or reflections or other things until we render it. Also, there's something called eccentricity, which controls the size of the highlight. Something, I think snow's probably going to have a really diffuse highlight, but something like glass would have a really tight one. Specular roll-off is how much light is being reflected from this highlight, and it goes up to 1, but we can overdrive it. I can put a 50 there if I want. Make something really intense. Typically you'd probably stay within the 1 to 5 range. probably even lower than 1 in most situations, but that gives us our highlight. But if we're making something like snow, I'm going to make that more diffuse, and I'm going to drive the specular roll-off down to about something maybe like that. Alright, so I want to pull this out of the way for a second, and I now want to show you what's known as the IPR. What you see on the screen is what Maya can create in real time, kind of like a video game engine. But Maya can create much more technical drawings or renders by using ray trace algorithms and things such as that to duplicate reflections and shadows and lots of cool stuff. Things that you can't do as easily in real time. And for that, you would actually render it out or process your scene out. And the way you do that, one way to see what it would look like in a render is go to your clappers up here. And the IPR will allow us to take a look at what our scene is going to look like in this is select a region to begin tuning. So I can click and drag, and now this scene is going to update as I don't have my material selected anymore. So I select my object, and in the attribute editor I can go to blend, and now that's why you always see these 3D artists, they'll have 2 or 3 computer screens to make their life easier. But you notice how this is updated as we change the attributes here. Now I was doing that in the scene, but this is the IPR will take it a couple steps further. We want to go at this point go ahead and add some bump to it. And the way we do that is click the chip here. This is going to allow us to insert a render node. And I want to grab the one that says noise here. Let's grab fractal is a good one too, but let's see what noise does. Alright, so when we did noise, it starts creating these it doesn't look very much like snow at all. But let's go into the noise attributes of the attribute editor, and we can begin to play with some of these attributes here and see if we can't get something more snow-like. And maybe it's the amplitude. And now you're starting to see something that looks a lot more like packed snow. And to be honest, I'm from the south. I haven't seen a lot of snow, but this is how I would imagine packed snow to look. And what the bump map does, it gives the illusion of surface relief or detail through placing a map. It's a black and white map. White areas are raised, black areas are lowered, and it's producing these through a procedural texture. The computer processes it. And I'm gonna go through here again. And so the noise texture has attributes. Everything has attributes you can manipulate. And depending on the scale of your scene and how you like your snow, I think that turned out fairly well. But I want to keep going down and see what it says in terms of color balance. No, that's not what we don't want to do that here. We want to do that in our material. So let's select this and go to our attribute editor, and where it says Ambient Color, ambient is, if you notice that the 3D object has, when it goes to gray and shades around to make it look 3D, see it gets darker and it has a smooth gradation. That's the color it's using to do that. So I would like to make that a little more blue, so it doesn't look, the snow doesn't look so dirty. Does that make sense? So I'm going to double click this. I'm going to click blue, and you notice all those areas begin to turn blue. Now that's extreme. Where did my but let's take this. So it's going to blow out your scene if your color's too light. You definitely want this a dark color. You just don't want it completely gray. So I just want some hint of blue, because it would be reflecting the sky, which probably wouldn't be blue, probably gray, and if it were snowing. But there's a big difference between it being black, it looks dingy, versus you put a little bit of color in there, and it gives it a better feel to the snow. So, alright, now the IPR is interactive preview, which as I make these updates, it automatically fixes it. But now I want to see the whole scene. I want to click on this, and it's an okay start. But I think we need to go in and tweak a little bit, and I think that some of these areas are getting blown out, so I need to tone some of those things down. But I'll do that in the next tutorial, and go ahead and play along and experiment with your material, and also your so play with the blend node, the color, and also if you select surface, go to the attribute editor. I was looking for the I'm looking for the noise node. Alright, before I end this tutorial, let me show you where to find your texture materials. If you, and I'm going to have to put some of this is going to go out of sight, but on this list to the side, you have your single perspective, your 4 view. You keep going in about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down. I don't know if you can still see that. It may be cut off. But there's something called the Hypershade. You click the Hypershade, and then bring this back up. And this is a place where you can see all of your materials. You can make new materials. I'm just going to pull this out of the way if I can. So I can see that blend I made, and then the textures, I can see that noise. So if I was having trouble finding it in the attribute editor before, I can come to the Hypershade and click on my materials here. If I double click, it should pop up in the attribute editor, and in the textures, if I double click the noise. So that's how you get to these. So take a minute and keep toying around with the threshold, amplitude within your IPR, and see what you can come up with. I'm going to keep toying on my side as well, and see what I come up with. But I think we have a good start, and I'm going to wrap this tutorial up right now.